my scandalous little darlings. Tonight, the earth itself trembles beneath our boots, as though the very stones have grown weary of swallowing lies. Do you hear it? The whispering of guilt, the groan of buried sin clawing its way back to daylight. I warned you, didn't I? Every empire of deceit must someday choke on its own dust, and Sir Roland de Mowbray, that splendid tyrant dressed in polished cruelty, is about to learn what happens when a man mistakes fear for loyalty. As dawn breaks cold and unkind, our trembling Bess and broken Alianor clutch their secrets like rosaries, the wolf, the sparrow, the proof of the unspeakable. The mines rumble, the peasants stir, and justice, that wild and unpredictable harlot, sharpens her nails. Lean closer, my loves. The collapse has begun.
Chapter 12. The Collapse. The pre-dawn cold in the bailey seeped into Bess's bones, but the small, fierce wolf carving hidden beneath the thyme sprigs burned against her thigh like a brand. Father Clement's words, "The earth remembers," echoed in her mind, a cryptic promise and a terrifying burden. She moved through the frigid kitchen garden with exaggerated slowness, her trembling hands plucking herbs with mechanical precision, her senses screamingly alert. Agnes's shadow seemed to loom from every frost-rimed window of the keep. The guard on the wall walk shifted, his silhouette stark against the paling sky. Time stretched, thin and brittle. Back inside the stifling warmth and pervasive fear of the kitchens, the bustle of the waking household provided scant cover. Agnes was already there, her voice sharp as she directed scullions and checked supplies. Her eyes, small and suspicious, swept over Bess as she deposited her meager harvest. "Took your time, girl. Dreaming of outlaws again?" The sneer was casual, but the barb struck deep. Bess kept her head down, muttering an apology about the frost, making the herbs scarce. Her heart hammered against her ribs. How? How could she get the carving to Alianor? Roland's morning ritual was immutable. He broke his fast, early, with Osric, reviewing mine reports, before summoning Alianor. The solar would be occupied. Alianor's chamber was watched. Despair threatened to swamp her until she remembered the laundry chute. It was an old, seldom-used stone shaft running from the upper floors near the family chambers down to a small, dank scullery off the main laundry. Years ago, as children playing hide-and-seek, she and Alianor had discovered you could sometimes whisper down it and be heard. It was a fragile thread, easily severed by stacked linens or forgotten debris, but it was their only private conduit left. Bess waited for the moment Agnes was berating a clumsy potboy. Slipping into the shadowed alcove housing the chute's upper opening, concealed by a moth-eaten tapestry, she pulled the carving from her apron. Pressing her lips close to the cold stone opening, she whispered, not Alianor's name, but the coded phrase they'd used as girls when danger lurked. "The thrush sings at St. Cuthbert's dawn." She dropped the tiny wolf carving into the darkness, listening intently. A faint, almost inaudible tap echoed back from far below. Received. Relief, sharp and fleeting, warred with renewed terror. The spark was past. Now it rested with Alianor. Alianor heard the coded whisper cut through the suffocating silence of her chamber like a shard of glass. She'd been standing by the window, the hated green samite gown laid out for another day of performance, staring unseeing at the gray dawn. The words, meaningless to anyone else, jolted her from her numbness. St. Cuthbert's dawn, the chapel, danger, and then the faint, unmistakable tap from the laundry chute grate in the corner of the room. Her breath caught. Moving swiftly, silently, she knelt by the grate. Reaching through the cold iron bars, her fingers brushed against rough-hewn oak. She pulled out the small carving, the leaping wolf, Eamon's wolf, alive. The confirmation slammed into her, not with joy, but with a surge of pure, primal fear for him. Father Clement had sent it, found where sanctuary was offered, the cottage, The earth remembers. What did it mean? Proof? Evidence against Roland? Her fingers closed convulsively around the carving, its edges biting into her palm, a tangible connection to defiance, to truth, to him. She slipped it into the hidden pocket beside the tiny sparrow, the two carving nestled together like secrets against her heart. A dangerous warmth, the first flicker of something other than despair or terror, ignited within her frozen core. Roland could take everything else, but he couldn't take this knowledge, this fragile ember of resistance. Not yet. The summons came as expected. Sir Roland requires your presence in the study, my lady, Agnes announced, her voice devoid of inflection, her eyes noting Alianor's pallor, the slight tremor in her hands that Alianor couldn't entirely suppress. Roland stood before the leaded window in the study, backlit by the weak morning sun, a dark silhouette radiating impatience. Osric hovered nearby, holding a rolled parchment. The air smelled of cloves and cold ambition. There you are, Roland stated, turning. His gaze swept over her, lingering for a fraction too long on her face, perhaps sensing a subtle shift beneath the mask of numbness. We ride to the western galleries. Today, it wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Osric reports. Difficulties. Obstinacy amongst the miners. They bleat about safety, about seepage. His lip curled. Weakness. Excuses for laziness. They need a reminder of who holds the whip hand. And you, his eyes locked onto hers, cold and assessing, need a reminder of the source of your comfort. You will witness the fruits of de Mowbray resolve. Alianor's blood ran cold. The mine, the place of suffering that fueled his greed, to stand there beside him, complicit in his cruelty. But refusal was unthinkable. Bess. She gave the slightest nod, her voice a thread. As you wish, husband. The journey to the mine works was made in near silence, Roland riding ahead, Alianor following in a covered cart that did little to keep out the biting wind or the pervasive smell of damp earth and crushed ore. The landscape grew bleaker, the skeletal trees giving way to scrubby moorland scarred by spoil heaps. The mine entrance loomed ahead, a jagged black maw in the hillside, surrounded by rough timber structures and the huddled, despairing shapes of the miners' cottages Roland planned to demolish. The air hummed with a low, constant vibration, the sound of picks striking rock deep within the earth, a grim heartbeat. Roland dismounted with a flourish, his presence immediately drawing the wary attention of the miners huddled near the entrance, their faces gaunt and smeared with grime. Their foreman, a grizzled man named Gareth, with eyes permanently narrowed against rock dust, stepped forward, his posture rigid with tension. Sir Roland. My lady. Gareth's voice was rough. Gareth, Roland acknowledged, his tone dismissive. Osric tells me progress is unsatisfactory, that the men whine about water. Not whining, sir, Gareth said, a dangerous edge beneath the forced respect. Fact. The West Gallery's weeping bad, timbers groaning, ground soft. It's not safe. We need to shore it proper, maybe divert, find another seam. Nonsense, Roland cut him off, his voice sharp as a flint strike. I've seen the assays. The richest vein runs there. Delays cost money, Gareth. Money Hawksmere. That de Mowbray cannot afford. You will drive the gallery forward. Double the shifts if necessary. Any man refusing is dismissed, without pay. Let him see how safe starvation feels. He gestured towards the hovels. New barracks will solve the laziness soon enough. A low murmur rippled through the gathered miners. Alianor saw the despair hardening into resentment, the flicker of raw fear in their eyes. She stood slightly apart, a silent, green-clad observer, but her presence was noted. Some glances held pity, quickly masked. Others, a dull anger directed at the symbol of Roland's conquest. Sir Roland, please, Gareth pleaded, desperation cracking his voice. We've lost 3 men to falls already this winter. That gallery, it's singing the death song. I feel it in the stone. Just a day, 2 days, to brace. Enough, Roland roared, his patience snapping. The sound echoed off the hillside, silencing the murmur. He took a step towards Gareth, his hand resting menacingly on the pommel of his dagger. You are foreman by my sufferance, Gareth. Remember that. Drive the men, extract the ore, or I will find someone who can. Someone who understands that bone and blood are cheap, but de Mowbray lead is priceless. The threat hung in the cold air, absolute and brutal. Gareth's shoulders slumped, defeated. He turned to the men, his face ashen, and gave a curt, hopeless gesture towards the mine entrance. The miners shuffled forward, their movements heavy with dread, disappearing into the dark maw one by one. Roland watched them go, a satisfied smirk playing on his lips. He turned to Alianor. You see, wife, strength commands. Sentiment is for fools and failed lords. He gestured towards the mine entrance. Come, see the source of your wealth. See the power you are bound to. He strode towards the entrance, expecting her to follow. Alianor hesitated, rooted to the spot. The darkness of the mine yawned before her, swallowing the men whole. Gareth's words echoed, it's singing the death song. The carved wolf felt like fire in her hidden pocket. The earth remembers. Was this it? Was this the reckoning? Not for her, but for Roland? A wild, reckless hope warred with terror. She couldn't go in there. She wouldn't. Roland stopped at the entrance, realizing she hadn't followed. He turned, his expression darkening. Alianor, now. Her voice, when it came, was quiet but clear, carrying in the sudden stillness. No. Roland froze. The smirk vanished, replaced by icy incredulity. The few Mowbray guards flanking the entrance exchanged uneasy glances. Osric's parchment roll slipped from his nerveless fingers. What did you say? Roland's voice was dangerously soft. Alianor lifted her chin. She met his gaze, not with defiance, but with a chilling, absolute calm that had been forged in the crucible of her despair and ignited by the spark in her pocket. The numbness was gone, burned away. All that remained was a terrifying clarity. I said no, Roland. I will not step into that tomb you've built for those men. I will not be a witness to your murder. Rage, pure and incandescent, flooded Roland's face. The public defiance, after weeks of broken submission, was an unpardonable sin. He took a step towards her, his hand closing into a fist. You forget yourself, wife, he snarled, the word a curse. You forget your place. You forget what keeps your precious maid breathing. I forget nothing, Alianor stated, her voice steady, though her heart hammered against the carvings like a frantic bird. She took a step back, not in fear, but to widen the space between them. The eyes of the remaining guards, Osric, a few lingering miners, were all fixed on them. I see everything, the blood on the cobbles, the stolen herbs, the lies buried with my husband, the fear you sow. The earth does remember Roland. And truth, she touched the hidden pocket, has claws. Roland's eyes widened fractionally at her words, at the strange certainty in her tone. Then his face contorted with fury. You mad bitch. Marjorie was right. Grief and that outlaw's poison have rotted your mind. He lunged for her, no longer caring about appearances, intent only on silencing her, on dragging her into the dark, or breaking her where she stood. Alianor stumbled back, but before Roland could reach her, the earth itself answered. It started as a deep, visceral groan. A sound felt more than heard, vibrating up through the soles of their boots. Then a sharp crack, like a giant bone snapping, echoed from within the mine entrance. A plume of dust, thick and gray, billowed out into the cold air. Shouts, muffled, terrified, erupted from within the depths. Cave in! The cry came from a miner who had been lagging behind, now scrambling back out of the entrance, his face white with terror. The West Gallery! It's coming down! Chaos erupted. Guards shouted, drawing swords uselessly. Osric gaped, frozen. Miners who hadn't yet entered ran towards the entrance, then recoiled as another deeper rumble shook the ground, sending a shower of small stones skittering down the hillside. More dust gushed forth, choking, and blinding. Roland, momentarily stunned, whirled towards the mine, his face a mask of fury and dawning, self-interested horror. My vein, the ore. Alianor stood transfixed, not by the mine, but by Roland's reaction. His first thought wasn't for the men trapped, dying, but for his prophet. The monstrous truth of him was laid bare in that instant, more damning than any accusation. The carved wolf seemed to pulse against her skin. Then, movement. From the tree line at the edge of the mining compound, a figure emerged. Ragged, limping heavily, one arm clutched awkwardly to his chest, clothes torn and stained with mud and what looked alarmingly like old blood. His face was gaunt, shadowed by beard and exhaustion, but his eyes burned with fierce, unbroken intensity. He held a woodsman's axe, not raised in threat, but leaning on it like a staff, his gaze fixed on the scene before him. The billowing dust, the panicking men, Roland's enraged figure, and Alianor, standing alone amidst the chaos. Eamon Thorne. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Thorne, the outlaw. But he's dead. Roland spun around, following the gazes, his eyes locked onto Eamon. Shock, pure and unfeigned, flashed across his face, followed by a wave of murderous rage. You, he roared, his voice raw, you should be rotting in a ditch. Eamon didn't flinch. He took a limping step forward, his voice, though rough and strained, cutting through the noise. The ditch wasn't deep enough, de Mowbray. Unlike your sins, his eyes flickered to Alianor, a look of profound relief and anguish passing between them before returning to Roland with lethal focus. You sent your dogs to finish me. They tried. But the earth, he echoed Alianor's words, his gaze sweeping towards the groaning mine, spat me back out. Seems it has a taste for justice. Before Roland could respond, before his guards could react, another figure pushed through the gathering crowd of miners and terrified onlookers who had been drawn by the commotion. Father Clement, his face pale but resolute, his robes dusty from a hurried ride. He held something aloft, glinting dully in the gray light, a heavy gold signet ring crusted with dirt. Justice indeed. Clement's voice, usually mild, rang out with surprising authority, amplified by the sudden hush that fell, broken only by the ominous groans from the mine and the distant shouts of trapped men. He pointed a trembling finger at Roland. This ring bearing the de Mowbray crest, found buried beneath the hearthstone in Thorne's Hollow. The ring Eamon Thorne was falsely accused of stealing years ago. The ring you, Sir Roland, used to frame an innocent man and seize his lands. The earth did remember. It yielded the proof of your treachery. The impact was instantaneous and explosive. A collective gasp went up, louder than the mine's groans. Miners who had known Eamon, villagers who remembered the old scandal, stared in stunned disbelief, then dawning fury. Roland's guards hesitated, looking from their lord to the priest, to the ring, to the ragged living proof of Roland's lies standing before them. Roland's face purpled. His hand flew to his own bare finger. He never wore the signet ring, considering it a tool for lesser men. Lies, he bellowed, spittle flying. Fabrications. This priest is in league with the outlaw. Seize them all. But the command lacked its usual power. The guards took a half step forward, then faltered, looking at the ring, at Eamon's wounds, at the accusing faces of the crowd, at the mine still groaning like a wounded beast. A monument to Roland's fatal greed. The carefully constructed edifice of his control, built on fear and lies, was cracking apart. Eamon took another limping step towards Roland, ignoring the guards, his axe held ready. The only thing being seized today, de Mowbray, he growled, his voice thick with pain and fury, is your reckoning. Roland, cornered, his secrets exposed before the very people he sought to dominate, drew his sword with a snarl of pure, unadulterated hatred. The polished steel flashed in the dull light. He pointed it not at Eamon, but past him, directly at Alianor. This is your doing, you treacherous whore. Your defiance summoned this plague. He lunged. not towards Eamon, but straight for Alianor, a final vicious act of blame and destruction. Time seemed to slow. Alianor saw the murderous intent in his eyes, the gleam of the blade. Instinct, honed by terror, and newly awakened fury, took over. Her hand flew to the hidden pocket, not for the carvings, but for the small, sharp eating knife she'd secreted there weeks ago, her only pathetic weapon against the nightly horrors. As Roland closed the distance, his sword aimed to run her through, Alianor didn't try to flee. She twisted, the green samite swirling, and met his lunge not with flight, but with a desperate upward slash of her own small blade. It wasn't skill, but raw panic and fury. The knife connected, not with his sword arm, but raked across his face, slicing a deep gash from temple to jawline. Roland roared, more in shock and outrage than pain, staggering back. Blood, shockingly red, welled instantly from the wound, streaming down his face, staining his fine tunic. He clapped a hand to his cheek, staring at the blood on his fingers, with utter disbelief. Alianor stood before him, breathing raggedly, the small knife held shakily in front of her, Roland's blood dripping from its tip. Her eyes were wide, not with fear now, but with the stunned realization of what she'd done. The world held its breath. The mind groaned. Roland's guard stood paralyzed. The crowd stared, aghast. Eamon started forward, a cry on his lips. Father Clement raised the ring higher, his voice breaking through the stunned silence. Witness! Witness! The tyrant's blood, drawn by the hand of the oppressed. Witness the truth erupting from the earth and from the soul. The scandalous hours are upon us. And deep within the wounded earth, the mind gave another convulsive shudder, its death song rising to a crescendo, a grim counterpoint to the explosive collapse of Roland de Mowbray's carefully constructed world above. The reckoning had begun, bathed in blood and dust.
And so, my dearest degenerates, the mine has fallen, the tyrant bleeds, and the outlaw rises from the grave like vengeance made flesh. Oh, what a divine mess! The noble blood of de Mowbray stains the earth, and I, for one, can taste the iron tang of poetic justice on the wind. The wolves have come home, the priests are digging up corpses of truth, and even the heavens seem to lean in for gossip. But mark me, collapses are never tidy things. The dust settles, yes, but what monsters might crawl from beneath it? Alianor has drawn blood, and blood, my darlings, has memory. Next time on the Scandalous Hours, we sip from a chalice of betrayal and resurrection as the hunt for redemption begins, and Lady Fate sharpens her blade once more. Until then, lock your doors, hide your sins, and pray the earth doesn't remember you.